Are you sick and tired of inflation and of seeing prices continue to skyrocket? Well, if that's the case, then you might be interested in learning about this trade that I've put on, which is allowing me to take advantage of inflation and effectively turn inflation on its head in order to, over time, get high returns as a result of the continuous devaluation of the dollar. So if you're interested in that, then keep watching. Now, one of the most surefire ways of generating outsized returns and generating millions from a trade is to follow a long-term, unrelenting macro trend. And in this case, that macro trend is the devaluation of the dollar due to inflation. If we look at the value of the dollar since 1913 to today, the dollar's lost about 96% of its value. $22 today gets you about the same as $1 would have got you back in 1913. And this trend shows no signs of stopping. If anything, it's speeding up. And this has many negative consequences for society. But that doesn't mean that we cannot also look for opportunity and opportunities to protect ourselves from inflation. So that's what this trade I'm putting together does. So if the dollar is continuing to go down in value, then what I can do is borrow dollars, effectively shorting them, and use those dollars to buy an asset which is going to go up in value. Therefore, my debt continues to shrink in value, the amount of money that I owe, and yet the asset that I've purchased continues to grow in value. So eventually, a small portion of that new asset I purchased will be sufficient in order to pay off the small amount of debt that I've taken out in order to make that trade. Now, you might ask, well, isn't that risky? And it's only risky if the Federal Reserve stops doing what it's been doing for over 100 years, which is continuing to expand the money supply and print dollars, therefore devaluing all of the dollars in circulation. If they stop doing that, then of course the value will increase and the trade will go sideways. But that would require them, again, to do something that they've never done over 100 years and something which would be extremely unprofitable for them. Because the reason the Federal Reserve expands the money supply is because it's very, very profitable for them to continue doing that. Now, what is shorting ultimately? Shorting is effectively when you borrow something that you think is going to go down in value and you sell it or trade it for something else. That's what we're doing here. And if you think about it, that's exactly what you do every time you purchase a house with a mortgage. Anybody who purchases a house, which is most people with a mortgage, they are shorting the dollar because they are hoping that that house is going to go up in value. Meanwhile, their debt, i.e. the mortgage, is going to go down in value. Now, if the opposite happened and the value of the dollars effectively went up, which is equal to the value of that house versus those dollars going down, then buying a house with a mortgage wouldn't be viable at all, and it wouldn't make any financial sense because you'd have an asset, the home, which is getting less and less valuable over time, and you're owing more and more and more over time, and you'll be in a position where you're less able to repay that debt. So nobody would buy houses using a mortgage if that was the case. So whether people realize it or not, every time they buy a house with a mortgage, they are shorting the dollar. They are, whether they realize it or not, they're making a trade. They're not just buying a house. They are making a bet that those dollars are going to be less valuable or the same value in the future. So the question is, how do we take this a step further? If we're already going to be shorting the dollar at some point, how do we take this a step further? Well, to take it a step further, you take those dollars that you're borrowing and you purchase an asset which is going to go up even faster than a property. So the bet there becomes, is the asset, the new asset that you're going to be taking on, is it going to long-term go up in value more quickly than a property? And in my case, I've identified an asset which I do believe is going to go up significantly more quickly than your average property. And that asset that I'm using is Bitcoin. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about why I'm personally buying Bitcoin, because that would require a completely separate video on its own. The main thing I'm discussing in this video is the fact that I'm shorting the dollar, and you could use those borrowed dollars to buy any asset that you believe is going to go up in value. It's just that for most people, shorting the dollar is viewed as a sophisticated trade that only somebody working in Wall Street could carry out. But these days, that's not true. There are opportunities in the DeFi space which allow you to make these trades. Anybody can make these trades if they feel confident to do so. So I'd just like to add at this point that this video is about what I am personally doing. It is not investment advice. Any trades that you personally make should be based on your own study, your own research, and ultimately your own analysis and your own decision making. Now, personally, I'm using a decentralized finance platform called Aave, which allows me to put up collateral. For example, I could put up anything that I think is going to go up in value, such as Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. I can put that up as collateral, and then I can borrow stable coins, which are effectively pegged to the US dollar, like USDC or USDT, and I can then use those borrowed stablecoins to buy any asset I want. I can take them off the exchange and transfer them into dollars in a bank account and buy any asset I want, or I can trade them on other cryptocurrency exchanges to buy more cryptocurrencies, such as it could be wrapped Bitcoin or Bitcoin, that I believe is going to go up in value. Now, another benefit to this strategy is that I can continue to compound over time, similar to how you can continue to refinance with a property, where in the example of property, you purchase a house using a mortgage. As that house goes up in value, and at the same time, the dollars effectively, compared to that house, are going down in value, that means that you have additional equity in that home that you can borrow against. So you can borrow against that house, and then you can use that borrowed money for anything you want. But ideally, you can reinvest it. You can either reinvest it in that home to upgrade it in some way, to add value to that home, and increase the monetary value of that house, or you can use it potentially to buy other properties in order to grow your portfolio. And by doing that over time, you can compound. Now, in the example that I've used of Bitcoin, where I'm putting up Bitcoin or wrapped Bitcoin as collateral and then borrowing stable coins against that Bitcoin, as that Bitcoin goes up in value, and by contrast, the value of the stable coins or the US dollars goes down in value, that means I can borrow against that Bitcoin again. So I can borrow against the increased value of the Bitcoin, I can borrow more dollars, and then I can even use those dollars that I've just borrowed to then buy more Bitcoin, add that as collateral, and then borrow against it again. And then as the value goes up yet again over time, I can then borrow against it again and continue the cycle. And in effect, what you get by doing that, if it continues on and on and on, is effectively an infinite money loop where you can continue to borrow and then add to your collateral using the borrowed capital and continue doing that. Now, of course, there are risks associated with doing that, with that type of trade, because the obvious risk is that the collateral will not continue to go up in a linear fashion and won't continue to go up in value forever, as nothing does. Everything has peaks and troughs. So that the Bitcoin, as you will see time and time again, will have a drawdown in its value. So the important thing with this type of strategy, which comes with experience, is being able to keep an eye on the value of your trade and make sure that you're always in a position to exit the trade by paying off the debt that's been carried out against that collateral, or add to the collateral with any asset you can in order to balance the debt and the collateral that you have. And that's something which does take a lot of diligence, and it does require experience to know what you're doing. So again, this is just information. It's not investment advice. It's not something I'd recommend somebody doing. But it's just to give you ideas on what's possible with the constantly developing DeFi space that we have in front of us. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to create this video and share this strategy is because I've seen a lot of people using the Aave platform and other DeFi platforms in order to carry out trades that I do not think are particularly profitable. The reason this trade is so profitable is because it banks on the fact that the Federal Reserve is going to continue printing and printing and printing money, going on pretty much forever until the demise of the dollar. So it's profiting from a large long-term trend that's going to continue to happen. Secondly, I'm using the borrowed dollars in order to purchase one of the top performing assets over the last 10 years. Now, there are risks associated with this. Any large swings in the market could cause my position to be at risk of liquidation. So it does require a lot of diligence and a lot of caretaking in order to ensure that that does not happen. There's also the risk, because I'm using Aave, that if for some reason the Aave platform goes down, I could lose access to those funds. So that's an important risk to take into consideration, and it does limit how much exposure I can get to this trade. However, because there's the opportunity for compounding, that gives the possibility for exponential returns. Because as I mentioned earlier, as Bitcoin goes up in value and as dollars depreciate in value, there's the opportunity to continue to borrow against my position and reinvest, and then borrow against the position and reinvest, effectively creating an infinite money loop, which is something very rare to find when you're investing. And I think those potential returns mitigate the potential risk. That's my risk assessment. Everybody's is going to be different. I'm happy to take that risk. If I lose my position, I'm not going to be too upset about it because I can always get that back. But I hope that this video will give some ideas and will help people in making decisions in the future about what kind of investments they can put together. But again, this is not intended as investment advice. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful or interesting. If you'd like to discuss any aspects of this trade, feel free to leave a comment and I'll try to get to it when I have time. And thank you for watching, and good luck in the markets.